All right, everybody, welcome to Philo Sapience, where religion meets reason. And apologies, we have been a little too busy, so we haven't been able to put any stream in past 2 or 3 weeks. But here we are, and we'll try to just go through a couple of shorts and see the arguments. And probably, as we do, we're just gonna review those shorts. So welcome, Madan. How are you doing? Madan is here. That means we have an English stream. Khali missed out today, but he'll be joining us very soon in our next stream. So Madan, how are you doing?
I'm very good. It's been a while since we've participated in one of these, so it's good to maybe touch base online on a stream once more. And it's not a complicated stream, this one. It's just our very usual shenanigans or drive-by shootings that we might engage in sometimes by looking at certain clips. So it's not a meticulously detailed stream, but we end up doing a meticulous analysis anyway, as the common law has been. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, and one more thing is that we didn't have enough chance. We didn't get enough chance to, search through any stream and go through, as Madan said, meticulously and, just tear apart their arguments. We have been doing that and probably repeatedly so. So this one is going to be just, we found, Madan actually found, so credit to Madan. Madan found actually a couple of shorts and said, let's go and review these shorts. So that's how it happened, basically. So what I'm thinking, Madan, is that let's open the link very early. Since we have very short shorts, basically, we'll open the link. Anybody who wants to join in, ask a question, maybe pose a question, pose a problem. I think there was one person who donated to us on Buy Me a Coffee. Very big thanks to him, first thing first. And if he's listening and if he knows that I responded to him and I said we're going to discuss fine-tuning argument, and he asked us to actually respond why a fine-tuning argument fails. And unfortunately, none of us have been able to respond to him. So if he's listening, if he listens to us over here, he's more than welcome to drop by and just say that, or even if he doesn't want to join on this live stream, he can just write in the messages, comments that okay, he wants to listen to that answer, and then we'll go about talking about that, why it doesn't go. So yeah, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the link public, and anybody who wants to join can join, and we discuss whatever they want to topic they have there in their minds. If they have an argument against us, that's perfectly fine as well. So while Madan, you have anything to add? While I just post the link.
Let's just start.
Yeah. Let me just post the live link. Right? Just give me 1 minute. So in the meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll add this. These are our usual suspects. You know who? Mansoor, Hashim, right? And so we put 2 of them, Mansoor, Hashim, and third one is from Zishan, basically, right? So we're gonna go on.
Everything is energy. You have to have energy.
Let me give you an example. If you have energy on your remote with a battery, can this energy write a poem?
No, but you use the energy to write the poem.
Right. That energy is not self-aware, or is it?
No, it's not.
Good. So if it's not self-aware, can it write a letter to you saying, tomorrow I'll meet you? You can't. So the energy, by having the existence of energy, it doesn't mean it can do something and everything. It can only do what it's programmed to do. So a remote is programmed, if you press this button, infrared or ultraviolet, whatever, right? That's all it can do. Instructions it follows. So the universe is energy, essentially, because matter and energy is interconvertible. So if that energy or the universe was not conscious and self-aware, it cannot make anything, do anything.
Okay, I see. Everything is energy. You have to have energy.
Let me give you an example. If you have energy on your...
Right. That's I think that's second grade understanding of the universe, basically, I would say. I think first thing first, we don't have a handle completely on what the universe consists of. Basically, our understanding of the universe is that at least two things we understand, right? And there has been speculation of, I mean, how can you not talk about dark energy, dark matter, right? I mean, these are theories that have been at least 30 years old, basically, right? Dark energy, dark matter, and we I mean, the physicists have been speculating as to why the galaxies are moving away from each other with an acceleration, right? And so they posit that the theory is that there is a dark matter, basically, right? Or dark energy, right? And dark energy is what is dispelling them away, because gravity is always attractive. So why are they accelerating? Basically, they should be, at least due to gravity, they should be retarding instead of accelerating. And it's a simple physics. I think if I can go to any school here in my town and ask an 8th grader or 9th grader about this physics, he'll just simply tell you that matter and energy are fine, but there are other things as well which we don't understand as yet, but what form they are, we don't know where. And again, another thing is, you don't have any hold of space-time manifold, what it consists of, the fundamentals of it, what is fundamental in it. Basically, our understanding as of now is quarks, leptons, muons, bosons, and all those things. These are the fundamental particles. But if you go back 100 years, you probably didn't even have ideas about quarks and all those things. So this is something that's going to keep changing, basically, right? Our understanding will keep changing. And these are very small things that these guys fail to understand. And they have a very simple, basic understanding, and they'll just take it and just try to, whatever their ideology is, just try to bang it, basically, in front of the audience, thinking as if they have they have the whole knowledge of the whole physics, pretty much. Yeah, I think I went to a tangent rather than addressing his main point, but I think I covered that, why it is that, just talking about matter and energy and the example he brought it. I mean, I'll come to that point that the example that I gave, that, oh, okay, can this whatever write a poem or whatever, right? This is a false analogy, basically. But I'll let Madin go about it. Madin, please.
Yeah. So I think the idea is, energy in and of itself can't write a poem. I think that's the basic fundamental thing that they were trying to get at. And I don't think anybody is saying exactly that energy in and of itself is writing the poem. I don't think that's a statement of physics. Fundamentally, maybe so, but I don't think anybody's saying that. So there's a bit of a misrepresentation. Nobody said energy is actually writing the poem. Energy or matter configured in a particular arrangement, in a particular way, that creates networks of neurons, that creates a organism that is capable of intelligence, a higher organism that's capable of intelligence with a brain, is capable of sentience, that can write a poem. And then that self-awareness comes along. So that's obviously, that is also energy, right? A self-consisting organism, or let's say an organism with a brain, that's ultimately fundamentally matter, fundamentally energy. But it's the energy configuration that enables it to write the poem. So if it was configured like a leaf, if it was configured like a salt molecule, it can't write a poem. And that's what. So it's a misrepresentation to think that energy, we're saying energy writes poems. Energy configured in particular ways. Fundamentally, it's still energy, but it's energy in a particular configuration that can write a poem. So I don't see what the issue is, as long as he's not misrepresenting it, and he has misrepresented it. That's where the issue arises. But if you don't misrepresent the science, then there's no problem. It's the same thing as saying, for example, energy can't cause a chemical reaction between sodium and chloride, and then give the example of potassium and chloride and go, look, it's not producing the output as what a sodium and chloride reaction, what that causes. You know, going, oh, look, here's a sodium atom, here's a chlorine atom. How is this happening through energy? Because look at this potassium one, and look at this iron molecule combining with the oxygen molecule. It's not producing sodium chloride. Well, of course, because it's configured as iron. Of course, it's configured as oxygen. And if oxygen and iron have a reaction, it creates iron oxide, right? In order to produce sodium chloride, you need those ones. So there's a different configuration of energy is what produces that, right? Now apply the same thinking to awareness, right? A particular configuration of energy in the form of a brain produces self-awareness. Other configurations at this moment don't. That's it. All of physics, all of chemistry, all of biology is like that, right? So you can't just say energy can't do something and then compare it to some other region of the universe where it's not doing that thing. Of course, it doesn't, because energy in different configurations do different things, and we see this throughout the universe. We see it through, and this is why we have chemistry. This is why we have biology, right? So that can be debunked like that. I think the more fundamental thing that they want to be saying is that energy can't produce. How can you? And it's more of a problem of dualism or problem of minds. How could matter produce minds? Which is another question, but they've not sketched it out like that. But the examples that Mansoor has given by just saying, look, energy, it doesn't do this or do that. It can be answered by simply saying that provided in the right conditions, in the right configurations, it does do that. And what empirical evidence do we have that? Is that just a speculation? No, we've got the evidence for it, right? We can start from there, but this is a plain observation that we see, right? As soon as brains came into existence, self-awareness did. How it happens might be a mystery, but we do know in that configuration, there's a correlation between our neural synapses and neural arrangements and self-awareness. That's a fundamental fact. That's not disputed anywhere, right? So there you go.
Yeah, I think one of the things over here is the potentiality. First thing, is there a potential for something to do something or not? Maybe there are things. So there are limits by physics, or by which nothing can do anything that it doesn't have potential for. Basically, right? You can't ask an atom to move a train, basically, right? I mean, that is probably not its potential, basically, right? It just, no matter what you do, an atom just can't move a train, basically, right? And if you have to do that kind of, if you have to think in that sense, then that's a limit by physics, basically, right?
But a cluster of atoms, a particular arrangement can, right?
Yeah. So, but a cluster of atoms can do that, basically, right? So that's the thing, basically, right? You have configurations which can give potentialities, basically, and certain configurations don't give certain potentialities, basically, right? What is a thinking mind, basically, right? It's a configuration of certain atoms. If you are a materialist or a physicalist, you would like to think it this way, that there is a certain configuration of neurons and synapses that comes about and gives a rise to consciousness, basically, that can act freely. But then this is exactly what he's not understanding, Mansoor, that there are configuration of things that can give rise to certain potential outputs that only those configurations can give. I mean, you can't have a set of neurons and synapses and say they travel at the speed of light. Not possible. They don't have that potential, pretty much, right? So I think he's probably asking very irrelevant questions, I would say, here.
Yeah. I think the deeper kind of point that they maybe want to say is, how could self-awareness arise in the first place from matter?
Yeah, I
Or
mean,
in-
if your question is that, you would ask that directly, very directly, that how did consciousness arise? That's a very direct question and a pertinent question, right? You might have refutations for it, or you may not have refutation. And maybe a person who's an atheist or agnostic would just say, I don't know, I don't have an answer. No, neither do the scientists have an answer for it as of now. So yeah, that's how it is. So I've seen Mansoor. Khali has a point. Khali has messaged. Let's see what Khali is saying. Okay, so Khali is saying you can throw some elements together, get it to work like a computer. Elements must be in specific configuration for it to function like a computer. So Khali's point gives me an idea for another thing. Can non-conscious thing write a poem? You pick up any LLM today in today's world, and it'll be able to write a poem, basically, right?
Mhm.
You just let it run forever, and it'll produce, sonatas and whatever, Shakespeare sonatas, whoever's sonatas and whatever poems. It'll keep producing those. And it's not conscious, right? At least not by what we mean it's conscious, right? So it's not hard to produce a poem by something that is unconscious, or unconscious in whatever we term as consciousness, basically, by those standards. So I think even there his point fails, basically, right? And you would say no, but then you have to you train the LLM. Who does the training? I'm not talking about who trains it, basically. But that's the same point could be taken for consciousness as well. Where does it arise from? How does it arise? We don't know. Maybe it goes back to our evolutionary past, where the consciousness arose basically from single cell organism to when we bifurcated to multi-cellular organism, and later on, basically, right? So I think many refutations could be made for that argument.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we have to accept the universe the way it is, in the sense that if, let's say, God existed, then you could also question the strangeness of that, right? By comparing it to other stuff. Like if God was able to create the universe, God was able to create matter out of immaterial reality. You'd say, how does matter come out of immaterial reality, right? So if the point is, how does self-awareness come from matter, then the question is, how does matter come from self-awareness, right? How does a immaterially self-aware being come from, produce matter? It's the same problem pronounced in the same manner, because the idea is it's a category shift, right? It's a category shift in the sense that you have a physical world and a physics, and these are hard material dimensional properties with structures and tangible reality. How does self-awareness, which is an inner self-thinking being that isn't embodied in anything, it doesn't have dimensions, doesn't have any weight, doesn't have any mass, doesn't conduct electricity, how does that arise out of something that does, right? And that does seem a bit mind-boggling, because it seems like a category shift from physics to non-physics. It's an immaterial world. But that same is in application. The same problem is there, exactly the same problem, just the other way around, right? In the case of physicalism, you have a physical world that eventually, at least locally known to our universe, our known universe, that produced after many years, after years of evolution, a conscious being from matter, right? But then, so the problem is, how did self-awareness, immaterial, intangible thinking arise from matter? But if you have a God, you have the same issue, right? How does a God, an immaterial, self-aware, intangible entity, there's no matter, create matter? There's another category shift, right? If
Yeah, it's only in reverse, basically, right? That's the thing. And then they get a cheating point there. Well, I do totally agree with your point, Madan.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, totally. But then that's where these apologists cheat, basically. Hey, no, we have it's not symmetrical problem, it's a reverse problem, basically.
I would like to hear an argument though, like how that substantiates, because it's the
Yeah,
same thing.
it doesn't substantiate. I'm just saying that they have that, they can just cheat that way, basically. They can
And that's the thing,
confuse the
they're willing
question
to
asker,
accept it.
basically.
So if they want me to think it's a confusing issue to think self-awareness can come from non-self-awareness, yeah, a self-awareness can come from, more precisely, I don't think the language is correct there. Self-awareness from non-self-awareness. That's not right. Self-awareness and
Material,
seemingly immaterial entity without any mass weight. It's not physics. It's just something that is not. Let's accept that. I'm not sure that's 100% correct. Self-awareness can still be physics. Yeah, but let's accept there is an immaterial aspect to us that just popped out of physics. If immaterial aspect can't pop out of physics, and they want me to accept that this is a logical issue or metaphysical issue, then what are they offering in return? They're offering just the reverse of that. They're offering a immaterial beginning with a material output that comes out of it, right? An immaterial
right.
mind that produces the Big Bang, the universe, right? But how does something that is in substance essentially immaterial, eventually create matter?
Material
How does
things,
matter come out of
yes.
material stuff?
No, I'm totally with you. I think that symmetry, that seemingly reverse juxtaposition is still a symmetry, basically, right? And you don't have anything to break that symmetry. I think. I mean, a theist doesn't have anything to break that symmetry, because if you posit it this way, then the reverse has to be true as well. And I think it's symmetrical, but they'll say no, it's not symmetrical. It's reverse, basically, right? And so
Well, something symmetrical can be reversed. I mean, like I don't know what you mean by it. I don't know. I mean, yeah, of course. Like all symmetry means is that it's the problem
it follows
goes
the same pattern, similar pattern, basically.
angle you look at it. Like if I'm looking at a mirror, that's my reflection, and my reflection is looking at me. From the left and the right to the left, it's symmetrical. Doesn't matter from which way is reverse or which way is forward. It's symmetry.
Yeah,
right?
I totally agree. I totally agree with you, and that's what I'm saying. In my mind, it's symmetry, basically. But sorry, they have that escape point, in a sense. No. You just can't compare those two things. One is going in the other direction, and the other one is going on the completely opposite direction. But I mean, I'm with you on that, basically. Right?
Yeah.
It's a symmetry in my mind, basically.
Yes. So basically, I don't want to quickly, concisely summarize the point. Like, if they're wanting me to accept that this is a problem, they can't introduce another one where the same problem kind of exists, just in a different way. And if the same problem exists, then you've not solved it. You've just confounded it with another sort of the same issue again in another level. This time it's the problem with God creating matter instead of matter, a mind creating matter instead of matter creating mind. That's what it is, right? Matter creating mind is difficult to imagine, weird, mind-boggling. So to solve it, they introduce a mind that creates matter. But the still mind-numbing, mind-boggling problem is still there. So you've not really solved it, really. So if you want me to accept a reality where the same problem exists, then why not just accept the current reality where the problem exists? Because at least in this problem, I'm not having to introduce an extra thing, Occam's razor, an extra mind. I've already got all the ingredients there, empirically observable. I can see the evolution of brains. I can see brains forming. I can see awareness eventually emerging. We've already got that. Now we just need to solve how it works, right? Yeah.
Totally with you on that. Yes, totally. All right, let's move on to our next project. All right, so what do we have? So it's about some ex-Muslim. All right, audience needs to see what it is about, basically.
Do you even have the courage to say what's your first name?
No, Muhammad Umar.
Is that your name?
Yeah.
Your name after Prophet Muhammad?
Yeah.
Your parents named you?
Yeah.
Your parents are Muslims?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, What do they think about you?
I don't care.
You don't care about your parents?
No.
What kind of a man are you?
These are your morals.
Oh,
not
so
mine.
respecting parents is my morals. I'm actually proud of that.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah ala ni'matul Islam.
moral.
Because you see, when you end up like an atheist, that's what you do. You even reject your own parents.
Yeah.
Do you believe in any morals at all?
Yes, I do.
Which one? Telling the truth?
I don't want to answer your question.
Do you even have the courage to say what's your
All right, so this is called attacking the straw man, basically. If you listen to this whole thing, I mean, the conversation starts with, what is your name? He says, my name is Muhammad Umar. And are your parents Muslim? Yes, he responds, yes. And then, what do your parents think about you? He says, I don't care. All right. Of course, in this context of this conversation, the I don't care means what he think about him being an atheist is what he's talking about, right? So he doesn't care what they think about him being an atheist. Of course, the point is not, he's not saying that I don't care about my parents at all, right? But this, all of a sudden, then Hashim reverses it, the whole conversation. You don't care about your parents at all. And of course, now he's caught up in that conversation, and he's probably not thought through what the questions are being posed to him by Hashim. So it seems as if he's being like really, he's been morally, what do you call, put down by Hashim, right? You don't have any morals, right? You don't respect your parents. And I think that's not what was intended by this interlocutor, right? So, and by this conversation, he tries to give an indication that this guy doesn't care about, he doesn't have any morals, right? Because he just doesn't care about his parents, right? Doesn't respect them, right? And I don't know, Madan, you'll probably remind me, what is that one verse where if your parents, it's, I think it's Surah Tawbah 23, but I might be wrong, right? If even if your parents or anybody from your family becomes gets away from the deen, then you don't have to respect them, basically, right? So I mean, this is already, he believes in that, basically, right? So if just told by a book, then he'll follow that. But then he's talking as if he has very high morals, right? But the morals he follows, if he follows that book particularly, then he's going against the same things that he's saying, right?
Yeah. I don't know the particular surahs only, but I do know that's the case in Islam. I mean, there are very many situations in which you can abandon, if not think your parents are bad, and disconnect from them and not associate with them. I mean, one is if you obviously leave the faith, but even if you're part of the faith, if you're a murderous villain of society doing things that are contrary to Islamic, yeah, you can disconnect or distance yourself from them. You may still have some sort of community with them, but in a different manner or a different way. So I don't understand why this person is not realizing that. Now clearly these clips are manipulated somewhat, right? Because we're only seeing certain aspects of it. We don't know the reasoning as to why he doesn't like his parents. So that's obviously a important. By the way, hello April, you okay? Oh, it's not April. I thought April has joined. Sorry, it's sorry. I called
Atangelo has joined.
I mistook you for April because she said, "Hey, just joined." But April, if you want to come along as well, we don't mind. But Antangelo, if you can just stay put, let me just finish our thoughts. But yeah, I mean, there are situations, of course, even in Islam, you can betray, you can disconnect, dissociate, excommunicate members of society. So I don't even know what they mean. So, but again, clearly, we don't know the reasoning as to why this man, this atheist that they're talking to, it could be a good reason, it could be not, has said something like he doesn't like his parents. I don't know. Until we know that.
Yeah, I think, Madan, I'm giving him benefit of the doubt. Whenever you are, when you go to these speakers' corners or places, and if you're not well versed in having a conversation, basically, Otangelo, have you dropped out? Your video is we can't see your video, but anyways, you're on the screen, basically, right? So that's good. So It's up to you if you want to keep your screen on, your video on, or if you want to put it off. It's up to you. But we'll get on the conversation with you in just a bit. Let us finish this review, and then we'll get to talk to you. So from I'm giving him benefit of the doubt that he's not he maybe has some issues with his parents. Maybe those are the issues that we are talking about. That it's when they found out that he has left the religion of his forefathers or his parents, then they berated him probably. They felt maybe they had an argument. They were not willing to listen to him. We don't know. Maybe he's not a good guy. Probably maybe he doesn't really respect his parents. That's also a possibility. We're not discounting those things. But in this, at least, conversation, it seemed to me as if, he probably said, no, he doesn't really care about what they think about his going away from, his parents' religion. Maybe he does respect them, maybe he does not. I mean, it seemed as if he does not from the last 2 or 3 points that he made. But yeah, we can't be sure about that 100%.
Yeah, he wasn't given the opportunity to explain, and the Muslim interlocutor just assumed that when the ex-Muslim said, "That's your morals," he might have meant that he doesn't hold a moral where he has to hold his parents in high regard. Now, does the atheist hold an ethic then in his head that I have no commitments to my parents? Or does he have the ethic in his head that I have commitments to my parents, or I do have some outlook to my parents, but there are certain conditions in which I don't have to? And if it's the latter, then it overlaps certainly with any other moral systems with you, where there are certain conditions in which you can betray or be disloyal or not listen to or disconnect from your parents. In most ethical systems, most communities, there is a threshold that when crossed, you don't have to respect somebody, right? So we don't know, we were not given any elaboration, but then the bigger problem is that the particular Muslim here that we're looking at right now on screen extrapolated from that and assumed that this is an atheistic principle, that you don't have to respect your parents. Now, that's the other one. So it depends what he means. So if he thinks it's an atheistic principle, that's ontologically, there is no principle saying that thou shalt respect your parents. That's a different conversation. That we're going to have a debate about meta-ethics. But if he means but if you're an atheist, there's sociological evidence showing that you will become unfriendly to your parents. There's no evidence of this. If you look at atheistic societies, generally speaking, they're just like any other society. You love your parents, you take care of your parents, you have a mom and dad. It's just normal. You respect them, right? If you look at communities like in Sweden, in Norway, they have very low crime rates, very low violence rates. Theft is almost unheard of. Norway, Denmark, very friendly, very neighborly behavior. There's lots of peace. They do it very well, and I'm pretty sure they're not just abandoning their parents or hating.
Yeah. I mean, even more prime example, Madan, is China or Japan, right? In Japan and China, if you go, I don't know how many of us have visited China and Japan. They have a deep respect for their ancestors, basically, right? Anyway, Otangelo has been waiting for a long time, so let's get on to having conversation with Otangelo. Otangelo, welcome back. How are you doing?
Hi guys, I'm fine, thanks. And you?
Pretty good. Yeah, we have been busy, a lot busy, and so couldn't have a stream for past 3 weeks or so. So today we said, okay, Madan said, let's do a stream. And I said, yes, let's do a stream. And I'm going to remain only for 1 hour. So let's see how that goes. But yeah,
I
how
was
you
also
doing?
unable.
What do you have? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I also was traveling, so I didn't access YouTube at all either. Yeah, but I was listening to you guys, and I think, Madin, you put it nicely or straight to the point. The question is, was the spirit first which created matter, or did matter create the mind and consciousness? And well, the thing is that if you put matter first, then you still have the problem to explain what caused matter into existence. And I think this is a very big philosophical problem to which I've never seen any atheist providing any coherent response to that problem.
I think, Otangelo, the first existence point is always problematic. Mind or matter, right? What is mind, basically, right? You don't have a definition for a mind, basically, right? I mean, not a cohesive definition. You might have some immaterial. So any definition you'll come up with always, use the crutches of material. You understand that? Oh, what is mind? Oh, mind is something that is not material. So you're always using the crutches. You don't have a definition. You understand what I'm saying?
Well, I
So
think
you
that
have the same problem. I mean, if somebody says, where did the material come from? That's a genuine question. But then the same genuine question can be asked to a theist as well. Where did the mind come from? Basically, whatever answer you may have, the same answer can apply to the material as well.
well, of course, whatever is related to the metaphysical, we will not have proof or empirical evidence to what it is, right? So whatever proposition that we come forth, either being a naturalistic one or a theistic one, is based on faith, on what we believe to be true, but we do not have access. The real question is, what is more reasonable? What makes more sense? And um, I mean, applying abductive reasoning to the best explanation, I think this is the right approach to address these questions. And the truth is that we have never observed that matter can produce information and consciousness. Of course, we have never either observed that a conscious eternal mind can do the opposite and create matter and everything physical. But the question is again, what is more reasonable?
Yeah, Martin, are you there?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Yeah.
No, thanks for that. Yeah. No, I do think we have observed. So you don't need to empirically observe everything in the following sense. You don't need to actually empirically observe. We don't empirically observe many things. We don't empirically observe continental drift. Not in a grand scheme of things, right? We probably can measure maybe a little bit of movements of the tectonic plates. But we can't. We never empirically witnessed Africa break apart into continents and so on, and break. The continents break apart. We inferred this from a series of evidence, right? And similarly, we've never really seen a star form. At least to my knowledge, anyway, right? But we have the after effects in which, just like a crime scene investigation, we can piece the puzzle together and go, oh, there was a murder here, even though we didn't see the individual person who got murdered. And in the same sense, we can say this star formed through these physical processes. And in the same way, I think we do have evidence for consciousness being at least connected to brains, right? That because of brains, consciousness. How exactly, but because of brains, consciousness. And we do have a lot of evidence for that. We have evidence from a whole host of neuroscience and biology and archaeology yeah, but from all these cross disciplines, more than I can know anyway. But from the ones that I do know, yeah, go on. Sorry.
Can I interrupt you? I think we have astronomers have seen stars form, basically. By the way, I just wanted to make sure that we and you're right, because it takes millions and millions and billions of years to form a star, basically, right?
Yeah.
And how they have observed it exactly. And this is to bolster your point, Martin, that we have seen so many different stages of consciousness arising, and exactly same steps we see in star formation. We see large clouds of, gas, which are hydrogen, which have hydrogen in excess. We have seen them in stages where they are collapsing, and then we have seen them in stages where they pretty much become alive, pretty much, right? So this is how we infer, and this is the abductive approach that Tangelo is talking about. So there is much more evidence for this using this abductive approach in favor of consciousness arising from mind as an emerging property, rather than the other way around.
Well, maybe you should go a little bit more back and ask how can matter, which is basically atoms which operate based on the laws of physics, how can they produce suddenly something which is completely different and doesn't operate based on the laws of physics? This is the big question. And I agree with you, Martin, that the mind is very strongly connected to the brain. But on the other hand, we have a lot of NDE evidence of people which have experienced near-death states, and they came back and they reported that they left their brain, their body, and then they report what they saw. So this also demands an explanation, and I agree with you also on that. What is the path to the cause. So we can take what we observe in the evidence in the natural world and then try to make a logical, plausible, and rational inference to the best explanation, and then eventually either come to ultimate origins and state an eternal creator or not. Now, the thing is that we have a lot of evidence of certain phenomena that we know that the mind can instantiate. But we have absolutely no evidence that matter itself can instantiate the same things, like information.
I think one thing before Madin jumps in, I just wanted to respond to one thing. Those evidences of NDE experiences, Otangelo, majority of them have either not been able to be substantiated properly because they lack proper methodologies, or they lack the proper scientific method, right? And so they were discounted. But then there was a study, and probably you are aware of that very famous study, where what they did was to understand this NDE phenomena. What they did was, whether they were real or not, they placed some numbers at the operation theater about 10 feet above and wrote something on those numbers which were not visible to anybody, right? And none of the people who claimed they had NDE experiences could tell what was written over there. Have you heard of that study?
Well, I have made an in-depth investigation into this, and there are some scientists.
Can you cite me a study which was done within very well confined scientific methodology?
Yes, absolutely. I can give you.
I have read a lot of Stevenson's studies, and none of them were convincing.
Well, there is.
You're talking about Stevenson, right?
No, I am talking about Pim van Lommel. He made a near-death experience in survivors of cardiac arrest prospective study in the Netherlands. This author has written several books and scientific papers and is a lifelong
Who was the
researcher.
observer? What methodology was used in doing those experiments? How was it established? Did they have anything hidden from everybody? Was it double blind?
Well, I cannot go into the details now because it is some time that I have investigated this and spent time to become familiar.
Yeah. So
with these experiments.
unless until it has a good methodology, everybody in the scientific community is going to reject it. And I have read a lot of those studies.
Well, first of all, if someone after an NDE makes a report of what they saw. This is just a testimony. We cannot repeat it in the test lab and say, oh, okay, this works.
No, but
So,
the reports of those things happening have been, oh, what the conversation was going on in the operation room, and what the doctor was saying, what the tools looked like, and all those things, basically, right? Those were their experience. That's what they saw. But when they said they were hovering above and looking down upon the operation theater to themselves, they were asked. There was right above the operation theater. There were some numbers written. What were those numbers? All of them, no exception. All of them failed to answer
well,
that
in
question.
this report here, I can quick quote here. It says, he was also able to describe correctly and in detail the small room in which he had been resuscitated, as well as the appearance of those present like myself. At the time that he observed the situation, he had been very much afraid that we would stop CPR and that he would die. And it is true that we had been very negative about the patient's prognosis due to his very poor medical condition when admitted. The patient tells me that he desperately and unsuccessfully tried to make it clear to us that he was still alive and that we should continue CPR. He is deeply impressed by his experience and says he is no longer afraid of death. 4 weeks later, he left hospital as a healthy man. So he
Yeah,
goes
but
on
this
and
is really
continues.
poor methodology. I mean, your standards for trusting something are very low, by the way, right? I mean,
Well, the thing is that, as I
this is not
said,
an
Pin van Lommel, he is a lifelong. He is not a Christian or a theist or something like that. He is just an
no. It's not.
investigator
It's not about
of
him being
of
theist or
of
atheist or
these.
whatever
Yeah,
it
it
is.
has nothing to do with that. But the thing is that he is very respected. He has written books and scientific papers
Yeah, but
on
then
these
people,
reports,
the smartest
and he
people can be
and
dumb.
yeah, and he reports that some actually they reported when they came back details of things that were in different rooms than the body was laid down, and it was confirmed that these details which he described indeed were correct. So
So these are not studies
this is
acceptable
good
in scientific
evidence
journals.
actually that what you are saying is actually not true. I think yes, there might be many that cannot describe anything during their NDE, but there are cases where people actually
Yeah,
came
but
back and then
these are
did these
Otangelo.
descriptions.
Stop, Otangelo. You are just regurgitating what you're reading. You have to think through your logical mind. Would you accept something like this just based on a simple testimony? Not at all, right? This is a claim on a out of body experience where you need a much more stringent test to ascertain whether the claims made by the claimant are true or not, right? So that's the
Well,
thing.
I
I mean,
mean,
you
the
can read
question here
many
is,
papers, and we can discuss many papers, but we'll bore our audience if we discuss these.
yeah,
Madin, you
I
want to
mean,
add something?
the thing is, what kind of epistemology do you apply to do your investigations? What can be said to be um, worth to be considered, what not? And of course, if you have a bias against the possibility that the mind can exist beyond and outside of the physical brain, then you will never admit or accept such testimonies. But I think there is absolutely no reason to doubt that the
Well,
scientific
yeah.
investigator, which has spent his lifetime to investigate this, that is not truthful in
Well,
regards of what he
go.
reports that he hears from
Now,
his patients.
yeah. So unfortunately, I do think there might be some reasons to doubt it, and I'll explain in a minute why. But let me just get off on the back of the point that you mentioned last. I mean, actually, I would be extremely delighted if what you said is true. You know, I mean, who actually doesn't want to life continue if your brain gets damaged or destroyed? I mean, think about it. Who wouldn't genuinely want? I mean, apart from obviously that's a hyperbolic statement, hyperbole. Sorry, um, There are people out there who do not want to continue living. Certainly, I would like to continue my life. I think Philo would probably as well, right? I think about this all the time. This is why I like philosophy, right? I would really, 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 really want you to be correct. I want the science that you're talking about to be correct, right? And I want it to be peer reviewed and replicated and so on and so on, and so I can trust it. Nobody. So think about it. Who would genuinely have a bias of the idea that the mind, when the brain dies, the mind dies, because the brain and the mind are either identical or connected. But if the idea is that the mind can float away from the brain or can continue, I would absolutely fantastically love that. Especially, I mean, we all have families. I would love to reunite with the family members. I would love to know my children are okay and reunite with them or something in the future if I lose my children. I don't have any children right now, but I am on the verge of it as well, right? These things make me think. So I don't think we have an obvious bias about these things. I think if anything, I'm more willing to accept what you're saying more easily. But at the same time, I'm a skeptic. Like if I told you, Antongelo, you have won £1 million or $1 million, it's not like you dislike that. I'm pretty sure you want to win that, but you would probably think critically and cynically, did I really win $1 million, right? And that's where I am, if you know what I'm talking about. It's not that we don't want the conclusion to be true. It's that the conclusion doesn't satisfy certain scientific rigors, and unfortunately it's not true. And so the things that you're talking about the studies, I've not read the specific studies, but I do know somebody who has done a comprehensive analysis, a literature review on a series of studies. His name is Keith Augustine, and I think the latest ones are in the 2020s. And he shows that many of these studies have significant methodological problems, right? Obviously, the author who does it doesn't necessarily highlight the problems, but later on, people review it, and then the problems arise. I think the vast bulk of them can be attributed to improper controls, not properly. It says on the paper this was done, this was controlled, but later on somebody else comes along and says actually the controls weren't there properly, and then it creates that doubt. Some other issues are that the testimonies themselves can be very generic, very broad, very basic. We don't know whether or not the person genuinely didn't know what else was there in the room already when they were mobile and walking around, and that on these sort of things shed doubts upon the testimony. Furthermore, we don't always know whether the person was actually subdued and immobilized and actually all the way down to being completely blank and dead. Like some of these testimonies involve hearing things in the room, right? But when people look at it and examine it and they go, actually, we don't 100% know the person was unconscious or dead, or whatever you want to call it, right? That he could have actually, and so there's an alternative interpretation that he could have actually just heard it, because his consciousness wasn't completely dead or off, whatever you want to call it. So you can look at Keith Augustine's paper. He does a literature review on many of these studies, and he summarizes that most of them have these sort of flaws, right? I don't know whether Stevenson, that person, or whoever that you're talking about, I don't know the author who you mentioned, whether or not he has the same flaws. Let's say he's right. I am very happy to accept that if it satisfies these sort of researchers. If all these researchers then combine and say, actually, Stevenson's study, this person's study that you're mentioning, is reliable, then I'm happy to go in that direction. But I've just not seen anything that really does go down that route.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear just a testimony from one person, then I would say, okay, that is justified to be skeptical. But when you hear that millions of people have actually had afterlife experiences, then it becomes, in my understanding, very, very difficult just to throw it off the table and say, well, these people have all had some hallucinations and what they are talking about is not worth being considered. And at the same time, you say that you are skeptical towards this, but are you skeptical in the same sense and in the same degree and in the same manner towards the proposition that matter can actually create consciousness, because we have absolutely no evidence whatsoever that this is possible, and that's called the big problem of consciousness. And indeed, all scientific evidence has demonstrated that there is no way that matter spontaneously can become self-aware about itself. So I see here a double standard from your side, no pun intended, but I think if someone puts on in an honest manner the evidence on the table and compares one to each other, then that person certainly wouldn't come to your conclusion. And in special, the problem which I mentioned about information which you have not addressed, we know that conscious, intelligent beings can instantiate instructional information which can be used to do things with specific purposes, and we have never ever observed that matter can do the same thing. And in order to have life, you need that. You need DNA which has all the instructions to make life. And I cannot fathom how this information, DNA, and all the right sequences, the nucleotide sequences could spontaneously line up in the right sequence and then start to bear information. That's absolutely out of
So,
any
Fangalo,
reasonable
Okay,
hypothesis.
Madan, can you give me just 1 minute? That's about it. First thing first, you lied about something, so I want to call out that lie. You said there are millions and millions of studies about these NDE experiences. Can you cite a paper where it says there are millions of studies, or can you at least show a Google page where it says millions of studies?
No,
I
I
have
said
not
that in
seen
a
millions of
colloquial.
studies.
Yeah, I said it in a colloquial
Yeah,
sense. I don't
okay.
like.
So it's a very few studies so far, very few studies.
No, I'm
And
not talking about studies.
majority
I'm
of the
talking about reports
hold on,
of
Atanjalo, when you were
people
talking,
which
I
had
wasn't
these
interrupting you.
experiences.
When you were talking, I wasn't interrupting you, right? Okay. So please mute it, right? So these are very few studies, very few psychologists are with Ian Stevenson or other guys, basically, right? That is one thing. And other problem that you have is when you don't understand how nucleotides can spontaneously arise. Nobody said, no scientist ever said that nucleotides can spontaneously arise into a DNA, basically, right? And connect all together. It's a process. It's a millions of years of long or billions of years of long process, basically,
Well,
where
time is not the mechanism.
no, time is a mechanism.
No,
Time is a
time is not.
mechanism.
Time is
You
not the
you grew up
mechanism.
to where you
You
are
need
is a
something.
mechanism of
You
time.
would
It's a function of time.
need something which,
Because
in actual form, would
your
first form the
smartness today
nucleotides and
is
then
probably higher
sequence
than when you
them
were three
in the
years old.
right sequence. That's what you would need, and you would need not only the physical.
Are you as smart today as you were 3 years old?
No, let me explain you quick here.
No,
This.
you because you don't understand. That's why I have to take examples which you will understand. Right, because you don't understand. Time is a function of things happening. I mean, things are a function of time, basically, right? That's how reactions happen. That's how chemical reactions happen.
Okay,
That's what I was explaining to Madan, that's how stars are formed.
So time is
Right.
not your friend, because nucleotides, they disintegrate and they become asphalts. I wrote a 3-volume book on the origin of life. You can check my name on Amazon. And I've investigated what scientists have figured out in regards of chemical reactions.
So
Well, can I finish my sentence, please?
sure. Go ahead.
Thank
Go ahead.
you. So they have figured out, first of all, there is no way how naturally nucleotides could form spontaneously. That's the first thing. And even if I give you an RNA molecule, rather than complexifying with other RNA molecules to become long information bearing strands, they disintegrate in very, very short period of time and become asphalts. That is the scientific evidence. So how do you go from that situation to your claim that millions of years will actually bring you to an information-bearing DNA molecule?
All right. So our response to your question is this. Are you sure scientists are saying there is no environment, no chemical environment, no physical environment, no temperature environment where nucleotide can survive? So they have tested all ranges of temperature starting from minus 100 degrees centigrade to 250 degrees centigrade. Have they tested all the chemical environments with methane, with hydrogen sulfide, and all those organic gases? All those experiments have been done and nucleotides have not survived that kind of an environment. Can
Well,
you
we
show
have
me a
70
study?
years
Can
of
you,
origin of life.
can you show me a study? Can you show me a study on that? That
Well,
all the environments have
first of
been
all,
tested?
it
Hey,
would be
hold on.
you
No,
to show
Otangelo,
me a
Otangelo,
study which
Otangelo, I'm talking.
demonstrates that this is
I'm talking.
possible,
I'm talking.
rather than
I'm talking. I'm talking. I'm doing the talking right now. So show me the paper where it says they have exhausted all the possible environments with temperature, with chemical environments, and everything, water-based, hydrogen-based, hydrogen sulfide-based, methane-based, all the environment they have experimented, and nowhere can nucleotides survive.
well, what you are
Present that
giving
study,
me,
and then your
what you
point
are
is
giving
valid.
me is an argument from ignorance. It's the same thing as
No,
to
it's not.
say
You don't
there are
understand.
flying
You don't
potatoes in
understand what an
Neptune,
argument from
and
ignorance
I
is.
should disprove your claim. That's not
I
how
know
it
that you don't
works.
understand what an argument from ignorance is.
That's precisely what you are delivering and presenting me,
I'll
because
teach you that as well,
in
Otangelo.
70 years of scientific
I'll
investigation,
teach you what an
no
argument from
scientific
ignorance
paper
is.
has been able to demonstrate the natural occurrence and development of RNA. So you are saying me, well, have we exhausted all the possibilities? Well, I would say this: it is rational to stay where the evidence is leading to. If in 70 years of scientific investigation, the scientists
But
have
I'm
not
talking
been
about
demonstrated, have not been able to demonstrate any route whatsoever in order to get a functional RNA molecule, why should I nonetheless stick to the hypothesis that this is possible? No, I will
You
start
are the
to
one who's
believe this
resorting
is
to argument from
true
ignorance, basically.
once that someone actually demonstrate that this is possible. And it's not the case that this has been shown. What scientists have shown is the impossibility of this. And now once
That's
you
why I'm
have that
asking you to
knowledge,
produce
and once you have
impossibility
that
paper.
knowledge, the question is, why are you still sticking to the hypothesis that time and millions of years will bring forth that
No,
miracle?
see,
That's not rational. I'm sorry.
regurgitating all this peripheral things is not going to work, Otangelo. You need to, you are the one who's resorting to argument from ignorance because you
No,
don't know, right? You understand that's why I said that I'll teach you what an argument from ignorance is, basically. Getting onto a positive side, despite that there being no evidence for one way or the other, is called argument from ignorance. So that's what it is, right? And you are the one who's resorting to argument from
no.
ignorance, right?
I'm
Not
working with
us.
what the science
And
is
you said impossibility of it arising from that. Show us the paper where scientists say that. Show us. Everybody, there are people listening. There'll be people
Sure.
listening to it,
I
right?
give it to you right
That
now. Give me a
impossibility of
moment.
any
Yes, I will
environment.
quote it to you.
No,
Okay,
no,
give me
no. I
just
don't
a
want to
minute. Yeah, you are
just
asking
paste
me
it.
for
Just paste it.
scientists that's saying
Just
that, and
paste
I
it.
will
No, no, no.
show it
I'm not.
to you.
Journal
Just give me a
paper.
quick moment, and I
Journal
will.
paper.
Yes, I will show you from a
You
scientific
no, no,
paper
no.
which
Journal
says
paper. Paste
exactly
it in the
this what
comment
you are
section.
asking me. Aren't you
Paste it in
asking
the
me
comment
precisely
section.
this right now?
I don't want
I'll
you to
give it
quote it.
to you. So I
Do
will
you?
quote you
Can you
here.
listen? Can you listen? Can you listen? Do you have ears to listen?
Well, I think you don't have ears to listen. That's what you're
I'm
showing right
asking you to
now.
paste it in the comment section, the journal paper. You understand that?
Sure.
Paste the
I'll
journal
give.
paper that all the possibilities have been exhausted. Nucleotides cannot form a DNA, right?
Okay. Here is
so
the paper.
all right. So can
So
we get?
here is no.
All right,
I
I'm
would
talking
like
about
to answer.
yeah,
Could
yeah.
I answer, please?
Just one
Could
minute.
I
One minute.
please answer?
No, please, just one minute, one minute. Before you proceed, I'll let you produce the paper because he requested something from you. Of course, you have the right to respond. I just want to say before you, whilst you find the paper, get it ready. I just want to say something as well, because it's meant to be a three-way conversation as well, and I've been left out of it. One, let's just calm down a minute. All of us. I mean, it's interesting to watch, I'm sure, for viewers to have a heated discussion, but it's strangely, I'm not in the mood for it, when usually I am in the mood for it. And I'm the one who gets into these kind of discussions, but it seems like roles have changed and Philo has taken up the bad cop role, and I'm the good cop today. And the other thing I wanted to say is, whilst you look for that paper on Tanglo, I think we've just moved away from the topic of consciousness and gone back to the intelligent design debate, which is a slightly different point, right? And therefore, the problem of whether or not matter can arise from consciousness or consciousness can produce matter is almost redundant, because what we're talking about is whether matter can exist in the first place and do these things, and we end up not addressing that part. In some sense, we end up implicitly accepting the idea that both matter producing consciousness or consciousness producing matter is a dumbfounding philosophical problem. But the reason why Ontangolo believes that it's more viable that matter can produce consciousness is not because there's something about the matter that can produce the consciousness that more easily than not because something about consciousness that can produce matter more easily versus matter producing consciousness, but rather because matter in and of itself can't form these sort of intelligent arrangements. It's more of a problem of design argument. So it shifts away from the philosophical debate about mind, and it's more about can complex objects, material objects, come about through blind processes. That will settle that debate, but not anything about the mind produces matter or matter produces mind. Nothing about that. I just wanted to highlight the nuance here, the clarity here, so everybody understands that. Look, we're shifting to another kind of area of debates. And the last thing I want to say is that, just bringing back Philo's point, I don't think it is an argument from ignorance or anything like that. Simply because what you're talking about, I think most of the scientists do say that under certain conditions, we've not seen this form of that. But they also acknowledge they've not exhausted all variables. That is all I've seen, and they've not. So they can't really. So it's like trying to say, it's basically like looking around our solar system and saying we've seen everything. There's no aliens, right? No, if you've not explored the entirety of the universe, you can't make that statement that there's no aliens. So Philo's point can be supported not through an argument from ignorance that we just don't know. It's that if we've not explored certain areas, we have good reasons to think we don't know. And does he have supportable, sustainable reasons? Yes, because we've seen only a fragment of certain environments and conditions in which those molecules aren't formed, right? So repeating the idea that 70 years, it doesn't mean anything, because in those 70 years, we still haven't, we've only simulated very, very tiny fragments of our understanding. We don't have the 4.5 billion years of events to really know exactly what conditions life formed or DNA formed. And most life scientists say this. They say we don't really know exactly. So that's why we can't, not through ignorance, but through evidence, we can say we can't sustain the conclusion that these chemicals can't arise in any condition of the earth. We can't say that. But anyway, yeah, go on, Antangelo. You want to get back on that, basically, to show, no, we're wrong. Go on.
Okay, I'll quote you here from the paper Evolutionary Steps in the Emergence of Life, deduced from the bottom-up approach and GADV hypothesis, the top-down approach. This paper is from 2016. It says here, it is quite difficult or most likely impossible to synthesize nucleotides and RNA through prebiotic means. It must also be impossible to self-replicate RNA with catalytic activity on the same RNA molecule. It would be impossible to explain the formation process of genetic information according to the RNA world hypothesis, because the information is comprised of triplet codon sequence, which would never be stochastically produced by joining of mononucleotides one by one. So They say 3 times here, impossible. And this can very easily be shown to be true. You can take, for example, a string of 100 amino acids, which would require 300 nucleotides in order to have that string in a functional way that it could fold into a functional protein. So the sequence space, in order for you to have 100 amino acids in a functional sequence, is calculated to the 1 to 10 to the 130th power. So that is already close to exhausting the resources of the entire universe during 13.8 billion years. And we are talking here just about a string of 100 amino acids, which is a third the size of an average sized protein in a cell. And you need at least 1,350 proteins in order to start life. So this simple recognition already demonstrates that mathematically life by unguided random means is impossible. And this was stated in that science paper which I just provided to you. So I think you guys are simply not considering this in an honest manner, because if you do, then you come to the same conclusion that matter cannot by itself become conscious and then start to make calculus, and matter cannot put together an RNA sequence which then would be information bearing and eventually form a string of amino acids which become the molecular machines.
Yeah, you talk a lot, but you produce very little substance, by the way.
Okay.
So
Guys, have a good
problem.
I have things to do. I think
Yeah.
I gave my thing. I think you guys are close-minded. That's why you are
Yeah,
still
I think you are
atheists,
close-minded, by the way.
because if you
Tangible
would
reason
consider
being,
this
see,
honestly
you're
and
talking and
seriously,
talking over, but you
then
don't
you would
understand even
probably
how to
come to
talk.
the same
Basically,
conclusion
how to
that I
carry
have
on a
come.
conversation.
Okay?
Basically, right?
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye bye. All right. Calling us close-minded, not letting anybody talk, and we are close-minded, right?
So, Philo, what did you think of what he said in terms of his paper?
No, I think that's a I don't know where he's quoting from. He hasn't given a journal paper to us. I repeatedly asked, put down the link to the journal paper that the scientific community thinks is a respectable journal, you know. So no, he's quoting from someone, probably from the Discovery Institute, probably.
So what he
So
doesn't realize, what he may not realize, I should say, is that you can find loads of papers that say lots of things. We don't go on individual papers. We kind of
yeah,
congregate
I
them,
think that
peer review
this,
them.
the
Look
you
at,
know how do you know that that's wrong? Because
yeah,
whenever these journal papers say that the language they use is impossible, you know these are fake papers, because any scientist who's a respected scientist would not say it's impossible, right? He would say under our test conditions in our laboratory conditions, these couldn't be produced, right? The word impossibility outright comes from a preconceived dogma, basically, and that can only come from people like Discovery Institute. So I bet you that this is coming from a Discovery Institute journal, basically, or some journal paper journal that is, yeah.
if you're still lurking around, would you be able to? Because obviously, I've not, and Philo's not read that particular one. We could come back to it. We can research it, and I can tell you exactly what I think. But if you just leave without sending the link, then we cannot do that. So if you send us the link,
Yeah, if you leave without sending a link, you'll be at a disadvantage. Basically, you'll be seen as someone who hasn't provided a proper reference when asked to, right? Anyway, we'll move on. Basically, anybody else who wants to join? Otherwise, we'll finish this stream over here. I think you're right. Today the rules have been reversed, basically.
yeah, maybe I'm on the verge of building a family soon. I'm feeling a bit more like light-hearted. You know,
Okay.
yeah, maybe what Untangler says isn't too bad. You know, like if I die and Jesus Christ loves me, that's great. That sounds amazing. You know what? Like, okay, you know, but you know,
I mean, see, these are all hypotheticals, right? I mean, they sound good, and maybe you would probably want to have, I don't know, maybe eternal of something is probably, I'm not really comfortable with the eternal of anything, right? Where you can't even, would you be would you be given a choice in heaven to unalive yourself? Basically, you have had too much of it, or maybe you know you won't even have that kind of a feeling that you have had too much of it. I mean, what is it basically, right? I mean, it's a big unknown to me, right? So that's why I'm uncomfortable with that possibility, right?
Mhm.
And eternal life. I don't know. I mean, I
Well,
can't
I
say
mean, the
one way or
idea.
the other, right? Yeah.
I mean, Philo, but I mean, let's not be close-minded, right? Like, let's just be open.
Let's be open-minded. Okay, you'll
Because
always get the eternal bliss, right? You
yeah, I mean
always enjoy
that's the
it,
thing. I
right?
mean, the idea is you're eternally in bliss. You'll never get bored. There's no end point to it. So that's the goodness of it, right? Like you're taking your own kind of idea of if it goes on forever, what if I get bored? But you won't get bored, and that's the point, right? So if you accept that, then it seems pretty interesting. Like if the possibility of boredom doesn't exist, then that explains that. I see no issues with that. I would like the idea of eternal life. Unfortunately, I see a massive case against it, right? A massive case. And at the very minimum, even if everything what Ntongolo was saying is true, it would get us to acknowledge. Well, the last paper that he said, if that is the common consensus within biology right now, that would be very good grounds to think that naturalism is false, right? Are you guys there? That would be very good grounds to think naturalism is false. I find it very surprising what Untangler said is just not the mainstream consensus within the sciences. Has this been buried? Has it been hidden? Is some sort of deliberate manipulation happening? Or do you think that this is just one of those papers that just is wrong? Because remember,
See, these kind of papers are being paddled by Discovery Institute, basically, right? And the intelligent design kind of proponents, basically. And see,
that's
I
right.
said basically again.
Yeah, because what Ontongolo doesn't realize is that you can have atheists who write papers showing that in fact these things can happen, and he would probably say no. Look at this paper says no. Then it's a battle of papers. So what do we do then? Then we accept this scientist or that scientist? No, we look at the overall broad consensus and the multitude of papers. And I think the multitude of papers in life in like biology and says that most likely life evolved and it can happen through a natural process. So
I
the
mean,
fact,
see, I think what Otangelo doesn't realize is that on a prior probability basis, what is more likely that these DNS, because we know that chemicals can come together to form complex molecules. Basically, simpler molecules can have a chemical reaction and form a little bit more complex chemicals or molecules rather. And those complex molecules, when combined together in certain conditions, certain environments, they can produce even complex. We a very simple example that I'll give here is of crude oil, right? Crude oil has all the organic compounds ranging from CH3 to C100H 122O or whatever, right? What do you call that? Alum and all those, very heavy elements, right? Where, I mean, how have these elements formed? There have been chemical reactions. There have been certain environments. The more pressure you give to these chemicals, the larger and heavier molecules are going to form. And it's well understood. It's not a rocket science, basically. I mean, even rocket science is these days comparatively easier, right? So, I mean, on a prior probability basis, what is more likely that there is a chance for these molecules to combine to make heavier nucleotides and then those in certain environments which we probably don't understand as of now, to combine it and make an RNA chain which is probably only 4 nucleotide long, and then a lot of these different 4 to 5 nucleotide chains to combine together to form longer RNA chains. And this is like a step-by-step process where just one thing doesn't occur all of a sudden. You don't have a chain of 1,000
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
nucleotides.
I mean,
Yeah.
no, you're absolutely correct, and I think most of what Untangle is saying only gets you to agnosticism. I mean, if you think if what Untangle is saying, apart from the last paper that he cited, which tries to show that it's natural, if true, I would think naturalism is false. Right? If true, I would think naturalism is false in the sense that the causal closure of physics, that it can't happen through blind processes, it can't happen through impersonal forces, and if it can't happen through impersonal forces, then I'm going to have to start thinking about a different candidate. But apart from that, I mean, if what Untangle is saying, you've got to be closed. Let's not be closed-minded. Let's be open-minded. Do we really think that merely blind impersonal forces can cause all of this? If there's doubt in the community that we, let's say we don't know 100%, we don't know it, that indeed, because we don't know how exactly life formed, or we don't know exactly how RNA did this or that, therefore we should be open-minded. But that would only get you to agnosticism. It simply doesn't mean we can go with the conclusion that theism is more likely. Nothing that he said before that last quote, I must admit, showed that theism is more likely, or a mind is more likely. Right? At best, it gets you to agnosticism, that actually there might be competing explanations how life formed, and there could be some sort of intelligence, or it might not be. It would be open to the possibility that one, we don't know all the variables, therefore there might be natural mechanisms at play that we've not known about. That's one possibility. Or there might not be natural mechanisms, it might just be an intelligent mind, right? Or the intelligent mind that created those things is subject to some other natural mechanism, because we don't know what sort of mind that is, right? So it'll get you to agnosticism at best, until he revealed the last quote, which was saying it's impossible. Now, if that's like philosophically certain impossibility, then it would mean almost, I would say that it would mean naturalism is false. But unfortunately, there's a dime a dozen sort of quotes that can be found in certain scientific papers. But when you look at the broad array of papers, you see contradictions where scientists are saying, actually, no, it's very possible. And when you look at the vast majority of microbiologists or life scientists, they're not necessarily all atheists. They do think that it is naturally viable. There's nothing, or at least there's nothing in the science suggesting it's not naturally viable, right? At that point, either you can be an agnostic, or like myself, may lean towards atheism, or strongly towards atheism, right? Because my atheism is not just a result of this matter. It's a combination of arguments: problem of evil, problem of suffering, revelation, not being being more consistent with man-made explanations, natural explanations versus theism did it, right? Every other area points towards theism is less likely than naturalism, right? And then when you have the consistency of physics explaining everything, right? When it gets to this point of how did the RNA form, how did that form? When we have this track record of physics successfully explaining things one by one, this gap in the scientific knowledge is more likely to be explained through another explanation that we don't fully know yet, but it's more likely to be a natural explanation versus a theistic or supernatural explanation, right? That's what kind of gets me kind of there to lean towards atheism, right? But if you didn't do that, then you still don't get straight away to theism. You'll be at agnosticism. Nothing that you said really, apart from the last quote maybe, that goes towards theism. But even that last quote, it doesn't really get you to theism. It gets you to an intelligence maybe, right? Because it's saying that it's impossible for it to arise through blind, impersonal forces. If it's impossible...
Yeah, it's a metaphysical force that can take you to some metaphysical whatever. It could be some wave function or something which you don't understand. It is not physics. It's not physical. It's not material, basically. That's about it. That's all where it takes you to. I think I agree. We agree. I think we agree.
And there would be some sort of tinkerer involved. it would suggest that it can't just arise through random processes or blind processes. It will be some sort of intelligence. But what that intelligence is, whether it's still alive, whether it's a god of theism or just like an alien in some other galaxy or universe, whether we're some sort of hologram in a whether we're some sort of computer-generated universe, all of these explanations now on the table. It doesn't get you to theism; it still gets you to.
No, it could even be, Madan. It could even be a random process that acts only once in a blue moon. It could be so random, but it's not physical. That's the point I'm trying to say. I mean, your God just makes the world or universe only once, right? When you say he thought through it and then made, what's the difference between your God thinking through and creating a world and a random process once in a very blue moon creating a new universe? I mean, when you see that universe, you just can't differentiate between the two. That's the point I'm trying to make here.
What I would also say then, too, if Antonjalo is watching, I mean, has he honestly looked at the other papers on this?
Yeah, and I have to say I have to apologize to him, and I'll request him to join back again. I think, I think fair point is that you have to make sure that you keep your points short, and I have to make sure that I keep my points short as well. So the conversation is a little bit more kind of interactive, because when Otangelo started, it was as if there was a monologue going on. Maybe I felt that way, and I'm wrong in feeling that way, and that's why probably.
You were trying to get into a boxing fight with him, like. This is why I think he felt uncomfortable and he wanted to leave, and that's not happened before with Antonjalo. We've generally had more amicable conversations.
More amicable conversations with him. Yeah, so if he's listening, I think I'll
so Philo isn't as innocent as he declares. As you can see, he likes to say he's very calm and relaxed and nice, when in reality he likes to throw punches.
But this has happened. Maybe This hasn't happened to me in a long time, or probably never. Maybe very rarely have I lost it, basically. But I was still, maybe whatever. Right?
But why? Why this time? What do you think?
I don't know, but just the randomness got to me.
Some sort of unknown force in people's brain. Random.
That was just a random event. One in a 10 to the power 123 chance.
Indeterministic event happened with no explanation. This has no explanation.
No explanation whatsoever. All right. Thanks. I think we should think about closing.
Yeah.
All right, Madan. We should think about closing the stream. We had quite a few comments from Muhammad Ali, Bilal, April, and I don't know if we have missed any very prominent comment from you guys. Rising Dam had a few comments. Quite a few people had decent comments, basically. So anybody who thinks we missed, showing a comment or addressing, or we should look at a comment that they posted, let us know in next 1 minute or so. And then if not, then we'll close up the stream.
Yeah. And just before you do that, let me just say, and again to Antonjalo, I mean, I know he's talking about honesty and sincerity, but has he looked at all the other papers that contradict him? Contradict the statement that he just read out? If you read all the other papers in biology and in chemistry, there's nothing in any sort of declarative, strong words saying that it's impossible for life to form like that. That's not the mainstream understanding. The literature actually is open to it and leans towards the idea that life formed naturally. It leans in that direction. It says the evidence points in this direction. We don't know exactly how, so you can cherry pick certain scientists, and that would explain why the Discovery Institute is a cherry picking place for people who go in that direction. But the same thing that he's saying to us, that we're not being honest because of his paper that he pulled out. Well, has he looked at all the other papers? What does the multitude of papers say? Right now, I can't read out the multitude of all papers, but maybe we can do it on a video at some point where we look at the broad consensus, like a literature review. And if you do a literature review, go on Google Scholar, you'll see that the most papers, there are papers out there that say stuff like that, like, oh,
it seems difficult or seems hard to think life, but life can form like this. But then there's papers saying no, that it isn't. It can, or we just don't have all the conditions, so we can never make the conclusion that it can't form naturally. We have different sort of views. Most of them lean to the direction that it can form naturally. So why should we dismiss those other papers? Isn't the honest view, the more honest views, look at it from a macro sphere, a broad overview of all of the papers, and look what direction they're pointing towards. Are the authorities in the field accepting what Ontangolo has read out? And they're not. That seems more honest. And so I don't understand how we're the dishonest ones when he's just not looking at the consensus. He's cherry picking the ones that favor his conclusion. So which one seems more dishonest?
Yeah, I think looking back now, I realize what triggered me basically, and I'll point out exactly, and people can go and watch that basically. The point I was triggered was when he said millions of cases of NDE. And he's thinking that he's talking to some layman who haven't studied. We have studied Ian Stevenson's all the studies and everything. And there are a handful of cases, by the way, of NDE basically. And this I'm talking about those cases which are in the research environment, which are coming from kind of so-called quote unquote research environment basically. And that's something triggered me, I think. And later on, I questioned on him, and he said, no, that was just a figure of speech kind of thing, basically. And I said, yes, of course, that's a figure of speech if somebody catches you, but otherwise he would have gone uncaught on that. Yes, of course, anybody who's listening to him, oh yes, there are millions and millions of studies like that. He must be saying the truth, basically, right? And that's something triggered me basically, because that's in my book, that is dishonesty, right?
Exactly. So we don't know how these NDs are formed. They might be very selective, as in like a selection effect. If anybody knows what the selection effect is, that maybe it's a 100,000 to 2 ratio, right? Where 100,000 people, 999,000 people, 999. Something like that, don't get an experience, but one does, right? And therefore, it just, through a selection effect, we just pick on the people who seem to allege that they've had an out-of-body experience when 99% of the population don't, right? And then, so what matters more is the ratio. We don't really, to know whether it's a real experience. But that doesn't mean that, it would suggest that the fact that most people don't have these experiences, it will suggest that we should approach it with skepticism, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a real experience happening. I will say, so the fact that there's a low frequency of these things happening doesn't definitively rule out it being false. It could happen in a low frequency, perhaps, to certain people in certain conditions. However, like I said,
it's low frequency means that it's not to be believed until the frequency passes a threshold which is believable, basically, right? So you can't dismiss it. You can't dismiss it completely by saying no, it's impossible. This can't happen. But your likelihood for it happening is very low, basically. That's what I'm saying, and that's what we believe in. That's how we live our lives, basically, right? So I think you're right. I mean, I'm just bolstering your point, but I'm saying that his threshold is probably extremely low, basically, in that sense that just because I have seen 100 such cases happening, that's why I think this is real. And
something that I said to Ontangolo that he doesn't take into account is that why would we be closed-minded? I mean, I explained to him that it's actually very, 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 very attractive if an afterlife exists. Now, tell me now, what seems more attractive? An afterlife exists, where you are in blissful heaven. When you die, you reunite with your dead parents. Everything is perfect, a perfect world. Or you die and nothing happens. Which one seems like human beings will naturally have a bias towards? Right? If I said to you, I will give you infinite thing, an infinite number of things, including £1 million and anything that you want, and versus I'm not going to give you anything, you'll just die. I think most human beings are going to have a natural bias towards the former, right? So I don't understand why he thinks that everyone else is biased and not himself, right? Does he not think that maybe his biases is leaked into his interpretation of the world? Like the fact that he's got children and he might die and then nothing will happen, that might be a very horrible conclusion that he doesn't want. He wants to resist. Is he going to have a temptation towards that? No.
Exactly. I mean, yeah.
I don't have a temptation towards that. That's why even atheists and agnostics cry when people die, right? They don't want that to happen. I just find it hard to believe that there are some atheists who are biased, indeed. They might have some personality disorders or issues, or they might not like the specific theistic conclusion. But keep in mind, I reject all forms of superstition and supernatural stuff, including Buddhism, which I actually like a lot. I think some interpretation of Buddhism is not very likable. But why is it that I'm not biased towards? If I'm a guy who's biased, if we're biased, then why are we rejecting the nice religions, right? Like, deism, that's a nice religion. Taoism. Is it Taoism? Am I pronouncing it correctly?
Right? Taoism, yes, Taoism.
I would literally love that for that to be true, right? Even Christianity in certain interpretations, that would be really nice to be true, I think. I think it'll be very good. Buddhism, that fact that we get, life continues after death. There's certain interpretation of Buddhism that I would really like to be true. We don't have a bias for death. Yeah, I don't really want the world to end. So I don't understand his accusation here. If anything, I would think the more mouth-watering, more temptation-filled, more attractive.
Bilal is saying you are talking about Dawaism.
Dawaism, yeah, maybe I am.
It's Taoism, DAO, Taoism.
Let me be completely honest to everybody. If I could if I could choose which belief is true, I would choose some of these beliefs to be true. I would not choose naturalism. I would not choose the fact that we evolved in the universe. I would rewrite the universe entirely. I don't like the fact that we evolved and all these animals for 4.5 billion years have suffered all this time to get to this position. I don't like that. If I could rewrite the universe, I would tomorrow. So if I can pick and choose my beliefs, it won't be naturalism. Trust me on that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree to some points of yours. And then I would say that if I could eliminate all these suffering, for evolution, I mean, evolution in itself, I find it really beautiful as such. But minus the suffering that it has, caused over, millions and billions of years, basically. But then in itself, that the beauty is not the suffering. I'm just putting aside that suffering part, but the beauty is that how, the beauty is that how can something like humans with thinking, intelligent beings come through a process which is, just seemingly random, basically, right? Guided by natural forces, pretty much, right? So that's the beauty about it, right? So, it has both the pros and cons and all those things, basically, right? And so maybe I would like to change certain parts of it, but then I'll try to keep certain parts of it. And also the thought of having an afterlife. Yeah. Sorry.
No, sure. No, I think that's like an aesthetic beauty, which can be subject to person. But I think
totally. Yeah, totally.
But I think, what I'm trying to say is, obviously, if it was all about preferences, then there are certain beliefs that we would rather have than naturalism. It's not. And my point is, I'm not necessarily accusing Untangalo for having a bias like he did towards us, right? He called us closed-minded, but my point is, so I'm not even saying to him that he's closed-minded. I don't even know. I don't know what led him to Christianity, but I think at some point he said it was due to emotions, right? That he loved this woman or something, and it was due to emotions. And my point is, there's no reason to think that we're biased and he's not. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Let's. Lazy is asking what the conversation is going on. Lazy, if you want to jump in and have a 5-minute conversation, please do drop by. There's no topic as such. I mean, we were discussing NDE, near-death experiences, and all those things. We were discussing consciousness, how consciousness can arise from, matter, basically physical matter, and vice versa, basically, and exchanging those ideas, basically discussing those points.
Yeah, I mean, at this moment we're talking about biases because one of our interlocutors has accused us
Yeah,
of being
and Otangelo dropped by and he accused us of being closed-minded. And I thought probably he was the closed-minded. I mean, who's the closed-minded probably? I think I'm open to all those things. I'm not saying that that's not true. I think he misunderstood that part, basically. I'm not saying what he's saying is impossible. Neither I said that what I'm saying is exactly what happened, basically. I'm saying I'm agnostic about it. I don't know what happened. Basically, I'm saying it's more likely that those nucleotides could form given certain conditions, and that's what we see. So my inference is based on evidences that it's kind of an inductive inference, basically, because I have seen chemicals combine together, molecules combine together to make larger molecules, larger elements, basically. And that's why my bias is towards that, basically, right?
It's not even a bias. It's following the evidence. It's induction.
It's following. So maybe I used the wrong word, bias. Basically, it's following the evidence. Basically, it's
what you mean
inductive.
is presuppositions. So it depends. Yeah, it's induction. So
It's induction, basically.
Yeah, but but think about it. I mean, his point is that he's got a paper saying that it's impossible, but we've got multitude of papers as well. I mean, I can't. I mean, obviously we're not prepared for that right now. I just started a stream. We don't know where the conversation goes, right? And Ontongolo is very big on these papers that he already has at his bay, whereas we welcome topics that can go from anywhere to anywhere. Hence why we're not specifically prepared to produce papers. And I don't need to prepare these papers necessarily because it's the mainstream consensus. It's mainstream consensus, that life evolved and this was a natural process. It leans in that direction. Now, there's some people who are unsure in the scientific community that it was entirely natural, of course. But vast majority of scientists, vast majority of papers support that view. So it's no good pulling out a particular paper without substantiating why that paper is more credible than all the other papers. And I think that's what Ontongolo doesn't really give due regard to. And that makes me question whether he's the one who's biased. Because if you're a layperson, let's say you don't know anything about these things, why would you give any credence to a quote by a scientist that says life arising this way is impossible, versus the 10 other scientists that says there's no reason to think it's impossible or it is possible?
Yeah, they say.
Yeah, unbiased mind, you go, okay, the authority actually said, like, I don't know much about this topic. As an unbiased mind, you'd come and say, if I had to bet, then I would either suspend judgment or I would go with the vast majority of the scientists or the vast majority of the papers, right? So how is that biased? That's more to do with a rational sort of gamble that you would make by honestly believing the experts on the area, which all of them choose or favor or lean towards naturalism.
True, agreed. I think, I mean, it's hard to explain to him, probably, right? I mean, we did try to explain to him, but then maybe we didn't get enough chance to be politely, informing him of that. Yeah. Anyway, Lazy, how are you doing?
Hello.
Seeing you after a long time. I think you closed your streams as well, probably. I don't know. Yeah, and we have been.
Yeah, it's been about 2 months now because I had some, personal things going on. Okay, so I've been missing for 2 months. I wish to continue this month later, like near the end of this month.
Oh, okay. Yeah, keep your streams up, by the way. Yeah. All right. Yeah. What do you have? I think.
Anyways.
Sorry.
So you go ahead.
I was saying that, what we were discussing, there was a caller called Otangelo, and he's a regular guest. And I think things got a little bit heated up between myself and him, which I think I'm regretting now. But maybe, all right. Yeah, I shouldn't have said some of the things, basically. But his point was that NDs are basically, he thinks that NDs point to something beyond matter, basically. The minds are not matter or not a property of matter, basically. And that's what this discussion was. And he said that we are close-minded and all those things. And I responded back in the kind, basically, you are close-minded and all those things. But anyways, that's the discussion. Do you have any point to add, or do you have any separate question?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what kind of argument he used, so I think I'll rewatch it once the stream ends. But for now, I think I've been thinking about problem of evil, especially like the logical version. So, like, do any of you defend that, or is it like the evidential version mostly?
The logical version is, Madan, what do you think? I think logical version, defend it as in...
Defend it as in like, sorry, are you a proponent of logical version of problem of evil? Like, do you believe that we can logically conclude there is no God from suffering's existence in this world, or existence of evil?
I think yes. I mean, yes, totally. Madan, please. I'll put it shortly, basically, and that's not all versions of God you can defend it, basically, but certain. I mean, at least Abrahamic versions of gods you can, just say that it's against it, basically, right? Because you can't have, you can't be all merciful and then have suffering, and that too gratuitous suffering, right? I mean, you can say the at least, and we have discussed it in quite a few of our streams as well. You can bring it soul building theodicies and this theodicy and that theodicy and other things, basically, but there are either symmetrical versions of those, against those, or they don't work altogether, right? So
right.
I think they they fail to respond to it properly. So I think that that goes for at least logical problem of evil, I think.
Mm-hmm. So what I find interesting is that it's been about 2 years when I visited Yasir Wajidi's stream, and I posed the same question to him, and he offered some kind of a mix of soul building theodicy mixed with free will theodicy, and then at the end he finally said that, you know what, God is also all wise, and since this is an internal critique, you have to grant that God is all wise, and therefore he must have some kind of an explanation behind all this suffering which makes this necessary, and therefore there is no contradiction between God being triomniscient and between a triomni God existing and evil existing as well. So what kind of, at that time obviously I thought it's not really a good response. It's kind of maybe saying that what do we call that fallacy? It's appeal to the ignorance, right? So it's kind of that. But then again, I think it's I don't really grasp how that makes it false. The answer that Mufti Yasir gave, that there could be theoretically or logically speaking a reason why God allowed all the suffering and evil in this world. Meanwhile, he's also triomni.
Madan, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people think, therefore, the evidential problem is stronger than the problem of evil is stronger than the logical problem. But a lot of people still also defend the logical. I think the person who coined the problem of divine hiddenness, what's his name? David. I forgot what his name is. He has his own version of the problem of evil argument. And I think that's more of a logical. It's a logical argument, or problem of evil argument, and it kind of deals with this, and he does a comprehensive book on it as well. And I think he tackles the idea of wisdom or etc. by just pointing out that you can think of logically possible worlds that God could have created instead, right? That and it's a possibility open to a wiser being that he could have picked those. But the idea of the I think maybe the force of it's a form of skeptical theism, right? God has greater wisdom, and
yes.
Therefore, so I think the idea of that has some force indeed. But I think I generally favor the evidential problems, and therefore I go towards in that direction. But I won't say the logical problem of evil definitively is successful. I would simply say it has a two-way force, in the sense that I can see the strong arguments for it, I can see some good arguments from theists in against it as well. But I don't see any sort of resolving argument, debunking all the logical problems. I don't think it's been debunked. I don't think the logical problem of evil has been debunked or anything like that. So by saying that God is all wise and therefore there might just be some unknown way of a logical possibility existing is the same way I have my own thoughts on square triangles, right? Now, can a square triangle exist? Well, it's a logical problem. It's a contradiction. I think no. But then somebody can come and say, well, is it very possible that somewhere in the universe that your puny imagination will not be able to grasp where a square triangle can exist? Can you logically, therefore, genuinely rule it out? And I may go, maybe my brain can't comprehend it. Maybe I'm not wise enough to understand how a square triangle can exist. That is the same approach that I take with the logical problem of evil as well. I do think evil and benevolence and suffering and benevolence and all God's characteristics, there is a contradiction. No matter what possible solution, soul building, there's a contradiction that emerges. However, at the same time, I acknowledge that maybe my puny imagination might not be able to grasp it, just in the same way I don't think, just with the same level of confidence, I don't think, if you told me, do you believe in square triangles? I would say, no, I don't. But I create a little bit of an exception to think, maybe I can't think of all sort of, my brain is too limited to understand how a square triangle exists. Maybe there's one possible world where it can, right? Therefore, I'm not going to say it with that level of certitude, but generally I would think, yeah, a square triangle can't exist. In the same way, generally I think a benevolent deity won't be creating this, any suffering, right? That's not gratuitous. But if you press me a bit more, I would say maybe my brain can't, So that's my stance on that. Yeah.
So me personally, I think that there is a difference between contradictions like a square triangle or a square circle when I don't think we can compare it directly to something like justification of evil, right? So for example, justification of evil.
I think your internet got lazy. We can't hear you. Can you hear him, Madan, or it's just me?
No, I can't hear him either.
Lazy, you seem to have disconnected, I think. I can't hear you. All right. Seems like Lazy is having some problems with internet. Because hello? Lazy?
Yeah, am I audible? I think I lost my connection for a moment there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying that I think that this is a little different because the concepts like square triangle or square circle is we understand these concepts, right? These are definitions. We understand it. What makes them contradictory is the definitions. But whereas things like justification for something being evil, for an example, let's say a man A unalives a man B, and in this case, what determines that the action was evil or not would be the justification behind it, right? And that justification would be in, I think you can say that it is in a form of proposition or knowledge, something that can be known. And what really justifies it could only be known to God. Whether it's actually something evil or not is something that can only be known by God, because he has all the knowledge and he knows each and every thing, that then he can make an informed decision on whether this is right or wrong. A human judge, however, can only make decisions based on limited knowledge and is always fallible, whereas God, since he has all the knowledge, knows when something is justified or not, and he only lets things happen which are justified. So how would that be like a response?
But I think where I disagree is that all is definitional. Your definition of a triangle is from your perspective. Your definition of God's benevolence is from your perspective, and that's as long as it's a definition, both are same in my opinion. And if there is a contradiction in one side, then any contradiction on the other side is similar. It's not a different contradiction. It's only based on the definition, basically, how you define it. Basically, if you define evil as anything, anybody who causes suffering without any reason, basically,
Yes.
then
I think
that's
just
a
adding to
definition. Yeah.
adding to Philo's point, if you do more of a comprehensive analysis of God's nature and definition and everything, when you put the definitions together, you do have a more complex version of the square and triangle issue, right? Eventually, once you know
Yes.
that God didn't, when you know that God didn't have to create anything and He could have avoided it, and no amount of potential justification would justify it, because He didn't have to use a justification. And that's when it becomes mind-boggling, because you could say God is wise, therefore He has a reason. But in every situation, this is why what is his name? I forgot. He's an Oxford professor. He created the divine hiddenness argument. Can you just look it up? This is why his argument is a very powerful version of this, because he makes the argument that a very powerful version of the logical argument from evil. He makes the argument that anything that God moves away from is pure purity, pure eternal goodness. And as soon as He makes a little bit of bad when He didn't have to, is a logical contradiction, right? It doesn't really matter what justification, the reason that the baby suffered is because it avoided that, or the psychopath had to kill this other person and God allowed it because of some mysterious self-defense that only He knew. Once you lay out all of the excuses, all of them contradict, even potential ones that you've not thought about, right? Because God didn't have to create anything. And in fact, God didn't have to create a world, right? And that's that's the strong version of the logical problem of evil. The fact that God went from perfect existence to creating an imperfect world. Soon as he did that. So I think you still have a very similar a more complex version of the square triangle issue. You have to sit down and write it down and make it very similar. Of course, I can't do that when I'm talking, but you do have a more complex version of that. And you can come out with the same sort of defenses that you can do for the square triangle one. Like somebody can say, all right, you've defined triangle really properly, you've defined square very properly, but what if there's just something that's missing that you've not thought about? Something that, if you were wiser, you would not realize actually this sort of square triangle can exist. And even an open-minded philosopher may say, maybe you're right. Right, and in the same sense, as an open-minded philosopher, I would say, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe we can't. Maybe there is a logical possibility of how evil can exist with a benevolent God. But I still see a force in the square triangle problem, and I still see a force in the logical problem of evil. That's how I see it.
I'm not going to take too long. I think I'll shorten it.
Are you talking about Daniel Snyder?
No, just type in divine hiddenness. The author of the divine hiddenness.
That's the guy, Daniel Snyder, basically. Daniel Howard Snyder.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I got his name as well.
If you're talking about Jael Schellenberg, I don't know.
Jael Schellenberg, yeah. It's the one that, the Hijab and Mohammed Hijab and Hamza Tzortzis debated the South African
Stephen Law.
Yeah, no. Mohammed Hijab and Hamza Tzortzis debated two South African atheists, and they used Jael Schellenberg's argument from problem of evil, logical problem of evil.
Right. So you're talking about Jael Schellenberg, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
And if anybody wants to,
there's no David. Yeah, there's no David.
Yeah, Schellenberg. You're right. It's Schellenberg. That rings a bell. Yeah, and if you want to look into that, Lazy, I think that's a much more powerful version, because he counters most of the alternative possibilities of things that we may not think about, and other possibilities that we can't even think about. We can't even think of the possibility by saying, by showing that realistically, going from, because his argument doesn't talk about any specific sort of suffering. It's just the idea that God was at some point perfect, and soon as he
his argument uses prior purity, basically. So
yeah, that's right.
But there are some sects, even mainstream Christianity, if I'm not wrong, which believe that that was not in fact a perfect state, right? God needed to create heavens and earth, and I know it is quite heretical in maybe Muslims to believe that, but I don't really see how an Abrahamic God
Yeah,
with
I
all these
think, but
omniscience.
if they put this
Yeah.
argument, then you can say that then you have no handle on what God could be. It could be an evil being, basically, right? And then you just can't trust it, basically. I mean,
Yeah, but
see,
then
they're shooting on
there are all sort of
their
possibilities
own
like
foot,
saying,
basically. Yeah, they're shooting on their own foot. If they go this direction, even slightly, then
Mhm.
they're shooting in their foot, basically, pretty much,
okay,
right?
I
I
have
mean,
just this last thing to say about this because Mahadan had put forward 2 points, and I think one of them I genuinely think is maybe not right. So it's when he said that it is really a complex version of square circle, whereas I think it's really not, because in what I'm saying is, let's define evil. Evil would be unjustified suffering, and that is pointless suffering, in other words. So the contradiction would arise only if a tri-omniscient God, omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent God would exist simultaneously with evil existing. But the point that that skeptical theists make is that there is no evil, because each and every bad thing that you supposedly see is justified. So there is no true evil. So there is nothing that is contradicting with God's attributes. So that would be my one thing. And other thing that he said is, why did God have to create? Although it's a genuinely mind-boggling question. Okay, if God was there in his perfect state, he didn't need to make any moves in order to, preserve his perfection. Why did he create? This action of creation itself is immoral because it led to so much of destruction and evil happening in this world. But what if it was something that was logically necessary for him to do? And let's not say, okay, let's just say not logically necessary. Let's say it was something necessary by his virtue, by his nature. He had to do that thing because of his nature, like his loving nature. He had to create this world, and he had to give free will to these creatures, and he had to do all these things, which makes him kind of a robot. But I think it still preserves the premises of the problem of evil, logical problem of evil. None of the premises are denied, and you still escape from the problem. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, but that's what I said. Then you shoot yourself in foot, because to bring about an argument in your favor, you weaken other arguments, basically.
Yeah, I understand that. It would be like saying, okay, we have a God, but he's a robot. He really has no control over his actions, and he has to do some things.
You have limited
Yeah,
God.
but
He's not
Philo,
all powerful anymore.
Yeah, that's a consequence, but it doesn't disprove the defense of the logical problem of evil. It'll just be a consequence, right?
Yeah, somebody could just hard bite the bullet.
Yeah, exactly. So that would just be a consequence. What I would, so without going into the consequences, like what would I say to an idea of the fact that there might have been some logically necessary reason that we just can't see, right, to create that. And I think it'll just kind of be the same thing, I would be saying, because it does sound, I don't know why it just does sound to me like it is the square, because there are people out there saying that you can have different types of triangles. Triangles only form in certain geometries. You can have, at the same time, I plainly think also a square triangle can't exist of a particular kind. I'm just saying that I have the same sort of confidence about the square triangle matter as I have for the God matter. So I'm not saying that it's not, like I'm saying, it's not impossible. There might be a possible world where there is a square triangle and we just can't imagine it. I am acknowledging that there might be a possible world. So I am acknowledging that there might be a possible world where there is a perfect God and he just had to create something imperfect. But with the same level of counterintuitiveness that I think it just seems weird, just like a square triangle, I think the same level, I have the same level or similar level of counterintuitiveness to the logical problem, to the logical conflict that you think that you have when you have a omnibenevolent, omni-triad God with some suffering. I just can't see why a perfect being had to create anything at all. Like, how is it logically necessary? Well, the argument in favor of that is that we can't see it, right? They don't make an argument. The argument is that we're not wise enough to understand it. That's it, right? So somehow this being, somehow it was necessary for it to create suffering, and not just suffering, but this type of world. And with my finite imagination, I can think of millions of other ways it could have been created. But apparently I'm not wise enough to realize how it had to be.
That's the problem, right?
Yeah, and I do think it straddles common sense. Like, I can't do philosophy anymore at that point, right? Because you're just going to say you're not wise enough. Right?
Yeah.
I can't do anything. Nothing can make sense if you're not, of course, not wise enough. But any problem in philosophy, we might not be wise enough for.
All right, fellas, we need to close the stream, right?
Can I infinite any contradiction you find, I think you can eventually make the same argument that we might not be wise enough. But and your point is that there is something to distinguish between these things. But I think Schellenberg kind of collapses all these kind of open-ended terms like justice, mercy, and says those are irrelevant. It's just the idea that
you go and read Schellenberg's paper, right? All right. So
perfection and
so
imperfection.
Madam, we'll close the stream, right? 1 hour became 2 hours.
20 seconds.
1 hour
20 seconds.
became 2 hours.
Yeah, 20 seconds.
30
It's
seconds,
just the
precise 30 seconds, and we'll close it.
Yeah, it's just the idea of going from perfection to imperfection. That is the difficulty, right? That's the contradiction, right? Because it's not just that he could have created another perfect world. He was the perfect world. And the idea that he needed, that he basically, the idea is it was logically necessary to improve the world, that he had to create a world with suffering, seeming suffering, that this was an improvement, right? And I don't think that, that is a contradiction, because God was perfect. God is perfect, right? If God is perfect, you can't improve upon it. And that is a very strong version of the problem of evil. I think that is a logical contradiction.
Yeah, you go and read Jill Schellenberg's paper. And so thank you, everybody, for joining. Thanks, Lazy. Thanks, Martin. See you guys next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.